On this Wednesday night, Israel and Hamas finally reach a ceasefire and hostage release deal.
This is one of the toughest negotiations I've ever experienced.
What it means for the future of Gaza, for the families of Israeli hostages, and does a ceasefire mean permanent peace?
We just want the war to stop.
Which premier fails to agree on a united front in the face of Trump's tariffs threat?
Protect your jurisdiction, but country comes first.
The plan to beef up border security and the Ontario premier's response to Trump's taunt about annexing Canada. South Korea's impeached president arrested. The lengths police went to detain him. And the U.S. bans a certain food dye, why it's no longer seeing one type of red.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Ceasefire or nothing, they chant. After 15 months of relentless attacks by Israel's military, there are tentative signs of relief in Gaza tonight. The war that's killed tens of thousands of Palestinians, decimated their homes, and left them with next to nothing may finally be over.
The Palestinian people have gone through hell. Too many innocent people have died. Too many communities have been destroyed.
In Israel, families of hostages still being held in Gaza are praying their agony will soon be over. Israel and Hamas are said to have reached a deal that means those still alive will be released more than a year after Hamas captured them in the October 7th attack on southern Israel. Good evening and thanks for joining us. U.S. President Joe Biden is taking credit, saying it's the same deal he proposed back in May. Incoming President Donald Trump, who has said all hell will break loose if there isn't an end to the war by the time he takes office, is taking credit too. Politics aside, though, there is such a lack of trust on all sides that this ceasefire, as with all of them in the Middle East, is precarious. Mike Armstrong has our top story on what's been agreed to and what happens next.
This is months of hope turning to elation. As news of the ceasefire spread, the streets of Gaza filled up. This man says people don't want their homes as much as they want safety, to sleep in peace. Well, the deal announced by the Qatari Prime Minister is planned as a path to that peace.
We are committed. We will continue to do everything we can, everything possible.
The agreement ironed out between Hamas and Israel has 3 phases intended to lead to a permanent cessation of hostilities. Phase 1 will last 42 days, starting this coming Sunday. There will be a ceasefire, and Israeli troops will withdraw to the east away from populated areas. Displaced Gazans will then be able to move north, returning to their neighborhoods. There will be a surge in the flow of relief and humanitarian aid, as well as fuel, and the rebuilding of facilities like hospitals and bakeries will begin. Hamas will release 33 hostages, women, children, and men over 50 first. In return, Israel will release a right now unspecified number of prisoners. Now, phases 2 and 3 will be finalized during the implementation of the first one. They would see the remaining living hostages exchanged for several hundred more prisoners, and then the exchange of the bodies of deceased hostages and the start of the rebuilding of Gaza.
Good afternoon.
Outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden says the deal is basically what he pitched last spring. He says while the next round of negotiations may take time, the fighting shouldn't start up again.
The plan says if negotiations take longer than 6 weeks, the ceasefire will continue as long as the negotiations continue.
On the Israeli side, relief, but there are still hurdles. The deal has to be approved by the Security Cabinet and the General Cabinet. There's also a 24-hour window for members of the public to appeal, people who were victims of the prisoners set to be released.
I don't look at it as they're releasing terrorists. I look at we're getting back our brothers and sisters, our family.
Now, the deal will be fragile. Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. are setting up a formal monitoring group to find and fix violations quickly and keep things moving on that path to peace. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
The death toll in Gaza since the October 7th attacks is staggering. The UN estimates more than 46,000 Palestinians, civilians and combatants, have been killed in Gaza. Nearly 2 million Palestinians are displaced from their homes. More than 1,500 Israelis have died, most of them during the Hamas raid and immediate aftermath. Journalists in Gaza have paid a high price, too. The Committee to Protect Journalists says at least 165 reporters and media workers have been killed, and it is now calling on authorities to immediately allow foreign journalists into Gaza and on the international community to independently investigate the deliberate targeting of journalists that has been widely documented since October 2023. A little later, a Halifax family who helped bring their brother from Gaza to Canada speaks about their hopes for lasting peace. Canada's premiers and the Prime Minister are trying to figure out how to approach the next president of the United States. They met in Ottawa today under pressure to come up with a unified approach on how to push back on Donald Trump's threat to impose tariffs on Canadian imports to the U.S. Apart from agreeing with the slogan on the Ontario Premier's hat that Canada is not for sale, there are differences on how hard to push back and punish the U.S. Alberta's Premier, who wants oil protected, refused to sign the final communique. Our chief political correspondent David Akin breaks down where things stand.
Morning, everyone.
For this First Minister's meeting, Ontario's Doug Ford wore his message to Donald Trump.
This is an example of how we need to unite, and we cannot let President Trump divide us.
We are not the enemy.
But there is division among the premiers on the issue of how best to respond to any tariff Donald Trump imposes on Canadian goods and services.
I'm a strong believer in retaliatory tariffs. You can't let someone hit you over the head with a sledgehammer without hitting him back twice as hard, in my opinion.
But Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, participating by video conference while on a winter holiday, and Saskatchewan's Scott Moe argued retaliatory tariffs would be self-defeating.
Taxing Canadian-produced goods in the form of export tariffs would be not only counterproductive to this entire conversation, we need to be talking about how we remove tariffs.
And then after the meeting, Smith distributed a social media post criticizing Ottawa for refusing to rule out export tariffs on oil and gas. As a result, Smith refused to put her name to a joint statement that every other premier and the Prime Minister signed, in which they all agreed that retaliatory tariffs might be part of Canada's response. Newfoundland and Labrador's Andrew Furey also leads an oil-producing province, but he argued Canadian energy products should definitely be on the table.
I see energy as Canada's queen in this game of chess. We don't need to expose our queen too early. The opposition does need to know that the queen exists, but they don't need to know what we're going to do with the queen. So let's see what the tariffs actually are first.
And that view is largely the one held by the Trudeau government.
The clear consensus around the table is that we need to respond in measured but robust ways to the American actions, whatever they are.
While Trump is getting sworn in on Monday, the Prime Minister and his cabinet will begin a 2-day retreat to fine-tune Canada's response to whatever it is that Trump does. Meanwhile, the premiers, a whole group of them, plan to be in Washington on February the 12th to hammer home the message that Trump's tariffs hurt everyone. Donna.
Okay, David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. Border security is another thing Donald Trump complains about, and Canada is responding. Drones and Black Hawk helicopters are being deployed this week to start patrolling the Canada-U.S. border. Mercedes Stevenson reports on the new security measures and whether they're enough to appease the incoming president.
As the clock winds down to President Donald Trump's inauguration, the federal government is trying to send a clear message.
We are hopeful and remain hopeful that the new incoming administration will understand just how incredibly serious we are on this northern border.
And nothing says security like Black Hawk helicopters. The RCMP will be leasing 2 of the powerful and highly capable aircraft to beef up the border, and plans to double that fleet soon. And like the Black Hawk's flying speeds, it's happening fast.
We anticipate that those 2 helicopters will be active and ready to commence proactive patrols supporting border operations on January 17th.
Black Hawk helicopters are known for their robust and extensive capabilities, from pop culture to the war on terror. But these will be the first Black Hawks the Canadian government has operated.
Really mission critical to a safe management of the border.
Black Hawks can cover large distances quickly and will be able to conduct surveillance and deliver specialized response teams when required to the border. They'll also eventually conduct joint patrols with the Americans. The helicopters seen here before their RCMP upgrades are being leased from an Ottawa-based company. The government hopes that Donald Trump will take notice.
We're not interested in drama. We're interested in making progress and showing the newly elected American government that we're serious.
The government also announced new equipment like mobile X-rays to detect fentanyl for the Canada Border Services Agency and an expansion of intelligence sharing on Canadian permanent residents with U.S. authorities, as well as plans that will have to be passed in Parliament to help secure Canada's immigration system. Donna?
All right, Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa, thank you. As the field of contenders to replace Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader narrows, one of the Prime Minister's key policies is already on the table. Turia Isri reports.
The first carbon rebate of the year went out across much of the country, but those payments may not last, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on his way out.
In terms of my own decisions, I will not be running in the upcoming election. As to what I might be doing later, I honestly haven't had much time to think about that at all. I am entirely focused on doing the job that Canadians elected me to do in an extraordinarily pivotal time right now.
The end of Trudeau's time in office could also spell the end of his signature climate change policy.
I welcome you to our land, America.
One of the frontrunners, former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, is hinting he'll scrap it as he prepares to officially enter the Liberal leadership race. Liberal supporters in Alberta are receiving invitations asking them to join in supporting Mark Carney as the next leader of the Liberal Party of Canada.
That is the Alberta I grew up in.
Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, who also has Alberta roots, is expected to announce within the week.
She's tested, battle tested, so people can judge accordingly. Mark Carney, who's rumored to announce, has a very solid background.
Some lesser-known faces may still be in the running and are standing by consumer carbon pricing.
What the data shows is 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back.
Even if Carney distances himself from Trudeau policies like carbon pricing, comparisons are being made to another former Liberal leader, Michael Ignatieff. A source tells Global News there are concerns about whether Carney could follow in the footsteps of Ignatieff, who led the party to a catastrophic defeat. Turia Isri, Global News, Montreal.
As evening approaches in Los Angeles, the winds are expected to lessen, but red flag fire warnings are still in place in some areas. Firefighters warn strong gusts and low humidity means new fires could spread and existing ones could grow. More than 80,000 people remain under evacuation orders tonight, and many others in Southern California are on edge.
Infrared flights last night indicated there are still numerous hotspots burning within the fire footprint. Significant safety and infrastructure issues remain, including downed power lines, broken gas lines, hazardous materials, and unsafe water.
Crews did make some progress yesterday. The Palisades fire is now 19% contained, the Eaton fire 45% contained. At least 25 people have been killed and more than 100,000 are displaced. South Korea's president behind bars coming up. What it took for police to find him and arrest him. South Korea's political drama is the stuff of Hollywood movies right now. The president, who has been impeached, is in custody, but only after police went to extraordinary lengths to arrest him, scaling barricades and cutting barbed wire. Vincent McAviney explains what it took and what happens now.
After their initial attempt failed earlier this month, the police were determined to arrest a sitting president for the first time in South Korea's history. Through the bitterly cold night, protesters and supporters of President Yoon stood vigil. As day broke, so too did the standoff. Some 1,000 police and investigators inched towards the presidential residence. First through security staff, then lawmakers from Yoon's ruling party. Using ladders to scale walls and buses positioned as blockades, they cut through barbed wire to reach the residence. Inside, President Yoon, who's kept a low profile since his impeachment, recorded a short message. It is deplorable to witness the way these truly illegal proceedings are being forcibly carried out with an invalid warrant. Despite his protesting, Yoon was arrested, prompting celebrations and despair. I hope President Yoon will not get tired. We will be with you until the end. He has taken actions that are only fitting for a dictatorship, not for this era. My opinion was that the president should be impeached. But when I saw Yoon's face on TV, I suddenly felt a pang of sympathy. For several hours, Yoon refused to answer questions. His lawyers claim the arrest is illegal because the anti-corruption agency doesn't have the power to investigate insurrection allegations. The clock is now ticking for investigators, who can only hold the president for 48 hours. For now, Yoon has traded his comfortable presidential home for this municipal detention center. But these are uncharted legal waters for this democracy, and today's events will only deepen its political crisis. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
Counting down to a Tik Tok ban in the U.S. ahead, what it will take for the app to stay alive. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has banned red dye number 3 from food products. It gives thousands of products their bright red color, but has long been known to cause cancer in animals. Red dye number 3 is added to things like candy, cocktails, cough syrups, and cereals. It is made from petroleum and has been banned from cosmetics for nearly 35 years. Medical studies dating back to the 1980s found male lab rats exposed to high doses of it developed cancer. Food manufacturers have until January 2027 to remove the dye from their products. The dye is not yet banned in Canada. TikTok, the popular social media platform, is preparing to shut down its app to American users. Its Chinese parent company has until Sunday to sell its U.S. assets to an American company. More than 170 million people use TikTok in the U.S., and many are already jumping to other social media platforms. Jackson Prosco explains why TikTok is in the crosshairs of U.S. authorities.
Thank God.
With the clock ticking on TikTok, panic is setting in.
Looks like that ban is going into effect, and I'm probably going to lose my 3 cents per video.
2 other Chinese social media apps, Rednote and Lemon8, have rocketed to the top of the charts, seeing a surge in so-called TikTok refugees.
Somebody told me about Rednote, and I dive into it right off the bat.
And we, myself included, downloaded an even more Chinese app.
It's all ahead of a decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, which will rule on whether to uphold a ban on the platform set to go into effect Sunday.
I think they'll do so on pretty narrow national security grounds and really focusing on the fact that TikTok is controlled by a foreign entity.
Chinese ownership and influence are why U.S. lawmakers voted to ban the platform in the first place, fearing TikTok's Chinese parent company, ByteDance, could turn over user data to Beijing or use TikTok's addictive algorithms to influence Americans. ByteDance could avoid the ban by selling TikTok to a U.S. company.
We believe if they sell it, it's without the algorithm, which is, call it the brains behind the technology. And in that case, it's probably worth less than $50 billion.
Possible buyers include a team led by Canadian investor Kevin O'Leary. But TikTok is digging in and reportedly plans to instead shut down service entirely on Sunday if the ban comes into effect. Just 24 hours before Donald Trump, a TikTok ally, is sworn in as president.
I have a warm spot in my heart for TikTok.
If the Supreme Court upholds the ban, there may not be much Trump can do to reverse it. This high-stakes game of chicken has become about more than just an app, spilling over into the fight between the U.S. and China over global tech dominance. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
The hope for lasting peace in the Middle East. We speak to a Halifax couple with family in Gaza. That's next. Many Canadians have been trying to get their family members in Gaza out through a temporary visa program Canada established, but it's been a difficult process. The federal government says only 550 Gazans have made it to Canada under the program. Youssef Asfour is one of them. He made it to Halifax last year, and Heidi Petracek spoke to him about how he's coping.
The Asfour family has been waiting for the Israel-Hamas ceasefire for what's felt like eternity. The major development happens to come just a day after 22-year-old Youssef marked his birthday.
بصراحة عشان بعيدا عن الأهل يعني أول مرة أحضر عيد ميلاد لحالي برا فكان غير وفي نفس الوقت كنت سعيد يعني بوجود أخويا وبوجود أهلي التانيين.
When we first met Youssef last year, he'd been in Halifax a week, still haunted after pulling a friend's remains from the rubble in Gaza. They're grateful to the federal government's special temporary visa program for Palestinians with relatives in Canada, but they still have family, including their elderly parents, left behind living in a tent. 8 relatives have died in the conflict.
Innocent people, right? Just, walking the street, and they're just, we just lost them, so it was hard for the whole family.
They know from experience any pause in the violence is tenuous, but there is hope.
لا لكل بداية نهاية يعني لا إن شاء الله بتخلص على خير يعني إحنا متفائلين إنها هتخلص مش هتطول ما في يعني فيش بداية إلا لما تخلص يعني.
It's a dream, Everybody for all ages, they just want to go home.
They pray the deadly shelling and gunfire will now end. But a ceasefire won't stop Iyad's efforts to bring his parents and another brother to Canada. Their home in Gaza was destroyed months ago. As for whether Youssef will ever return, he says only if there's lasting peace for both sides.
إحنا ما بدنا دم وما بدنا موت وما بدنا تشريد وما بدنا نزوح بس إحنا بدنا هالحرب توقف وما تستمر يعني للأبد فهي اللي بدنا إياه صراحة هي اللي بدنا إياه العالم والكنديين يعرفوه.
Like so many, he's not sure if that will happen. At this moment, he says he's focused on a new job and building his new life in Canada. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Here in Canada is Botwood, Newfoundland and Labrador. Thanks for watching and hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.